Our first speaker today is Brandon Carrasco. This morning, Brandon will be presenting a 20-minute keynote speech. This is the last project in the Presentation Mastery Level 5. This keynote is intended to be presented to a group of youth or young people. So be young at heart, because our youth members may not be present.
We lost our youth. Lawrence is gone.
Michelle, don't forget Michelle. This morning, David's the youngest guy in the room, I think. That's really frightening. This morning's speaker has been alive for nearly 4 decades. Isn't it interesting how some people reach for 4 decades? I can't remember 4 decades. In that time, he's done a few things right and many more wrong. The perspective gained from all of this experience has proven very valuable. Brandon will share one of the most important lessons that has helped him achieve several big accomplishments and have a comfortable life. Please help me welcome Brandon Carrasco to present his keynote titled, You'll Be 5 Years Older. You'll be 5 years older.
When's the last time that you started something so big that you couldn't see how you could possibly ever finish it? For some of you, it might have been school. When you're 14, 4 years seems like forever. How will you ever get to the end of that? For some, maybe it's sports. When you started, you could never see yourself on the varsity team or in the championship game. Maybe it's saving money for something you really wanted to buy, and you worked all summer long to save up for it, or even years to save up for it. And some, maybe you've never really done anything like that, and you never really felt that way, but you want to. In 2008, I started something that I could not see how I could possibly ever finish. And from that, I learned some lessons that I'll share with you this morning. Let me take a step back though. In 1999, I started college right after high school. That's what I was supposed to do. That's what I planned on doing. I enrolled in the School of Engineering at UNM. I was going to be a mechanical engineer. I was so excited to be an engineer. I was so excited to be out of high school and growing up and doing big things, going to the big school. But it didn't take long for that to fade, because I made a big mistake. My mistake wasn't staying home to go to school. My mistake wasn't going to UNM, although if you're an Aggie, you might think that. My mistake was I hung out with the same people who weren't doing what I was doing, who didn't want what I wanted. They partied, they hung out, they didn't really have ambition, and it didn't take long until I wasn't doing quite as well in my classes, until naps in the student union building became a little more important than a statics class. And next thing you know, in my second year, my grades were slipping. I was on probation for the lottery scholarship, so my scholarship was going away. And at the end of those 2 years, I had lost all interest. I finished 2 years of school, and I dropped out. My life was on cruise control. I didn't have a lot of responsibilities. I didn't have anywhere I really had to be. And so I was just taking it easy. No school. I had a manager. And this guy was always after me. You gotta go to school. You've gotta go back. You've gotta get your degree. It's so important. It's the one thing nobody can take away from you. I wasn't having any of it. But life has a way of changing things on you. A few years later, I got married. And the woman that I married, my wife, had 3 children from a previous marriage. So now all of a sudden, I had to grow up real quick. Because now I have kids, I have a family. I've got to work. And that same manager was still there in my ear. You got to go to school. The company will pay for it. Go to school. Well, now, this is way too hard. I've got kids. There's no way I can go to school. And luckily, My wife also was pushing. You should go to school. Fine. In 2008, I enrolled back in school, and I took 2 classes. And about halfway through that first semester, I realized how painfully slow it was going to be to finish that degree. I could not see the end. How on earth would I ever finish? I sat there at work one day, sitting in my cubicle, my coworker in the cubicle next to me, and another guy who was older than both of us. His name was Matt Broylo. He was an engineer. He was almost 40. And Matt was, almost my age. He was old. Matt stood there super casually on my cubicle wall, and he said, Matt had been going to school part-time. He had finished his undergrad degree, and he was just about to finish his master's degree. And he's leaning on my cubicle wall, and he says, you'll be way ahead of me. And he goes, whatever. You're going to be 5 years older anyway. That casual statement, Matt had no idea the impact that would have on me, because it shifted my thinking. It changed everything about the way I looked at this. How painfully slow this was going to be turned into, I wasted the last 5 years not going to school. Why not spend the next 5 years going to school? I'll be 5 years older anyway. I might as well have accomplished something. And that shift in perspective gave me kind of new energy to go after this. And so I finished my 2 classes that semester, and the next semester, 2 more classes, and the next semester, 2 more classes. Well, now the credit hours were starting to add up. I could see that I had done something. My GPA was getting better because it was crappy when I finished the first round. And I was doing really good, and I was excited. And then there was a change in management where I worked. New COO, a new chief operating officer came in and was our boss. His second day on the job, I scheduled half hour with him and made kind of a bold proposition. I told him how well I was doing in school. I told him how I had been going to school for 1.5 years part-time and keeping up with my full-time job. And I asked him, buy me a laptop. Nobody in the company had engineering laptops. Buy me a laptop. Let me go to school full-time. I'll work from UNM. I'll work on weekends. I'll work on evenings. I'll keep my full-time schedule, and I'll do a better job than anybody else here. Give me 1 semester to prove it to you. He didn't know any better, so he said, yeah, okay, sure, and approved it. And so the next semester, I enrolled full-time. But that was lesson number 1 learned. If you just get started and you keep moving, opportunities and doors open up all the time. But you've got to be started and you've got to be moving to take advantage of them. And that was the first lesson I learned. I captured that opportunity. So now I'm going to school full-time. And it was grueling. Engineering school, dynamics, and controls theory class. They were killers. I was spending so much time with study groups, but then I was working 2 hours between classes from one of the commons areas, and then I would work in the evenings. I would work at 3 in the morning, or sometimes I would do homework at 3 in the morning. I worked on Saturdays all day, and then did homework in the office all night, trying to get it done and trying to keep up with everything. My grades were good. I kept up with work. I did a good job. I killed it. But I left everything out there when I did this. To the point that when I graduated in December of 2011, I showed up to the Civic Center for the School of Engineering graduation ceremony. This was the big thing. This is what I had been working towards. We show up and all the kids are getting out of the car and I'm throwing my hat and my gown on as we're going into the Civic Center. And I get there and I get in line. And we go through the ceremony and it's applause and celebration and high-fiving classmates and pictures with family afterwards. And we finally are walking back out to the car. I realized I don't have my keys. Did I leave them inside? But what's that sound? The van's running. My brain was mush. I left the van running in the Civic Center parking garage for 3 hours. It took everything out of me to finish school and go through all of that. So what do you think I did then? I didn't take a vacation. I didn't take some time off. I didn't wait a couple of years before I did something else big. I enrolled in the master's degree program. I wanted an MBA. I wanted my business degree. Because I learned lesson number 2. When you finished one of those big, audacious goals, it gives you confidence and motivation that you can do something else big. And so I stepped right into the next thing. Because success leads to more success. I knew that I could get it done, and so I got started. And I could only enroll for 2 classes right off the bat because I hadn't even taken the entrance exam yet. You could take 2 classes before you took the exam and were admitted into the program. But I got started immediately. And so now, I knew how to do all of this. I knew how to go to school, and I knew how to work full time. I knew how to get it all done. And so I finished that degree, and I graduated. And let me share with you what it did for me. Because when I left that engineering, or when I finished my engineering degree, I left that first job that I had at a very small company. I was paid very little at that company. I was a drafter. And I took a different engineering job. And that was a nice bump in pay. And the company did really well. David works there. They do good. I got a great bonus that year. And then I did well there, and I got a raise. I finished my master's degree, and I took a new job. Totally different job. I went from being an engineer to now being a product manager. It was more of a business job. Completely different path. And I did good. And I got promoted. And then I still did good. And I got promoted again to now be a part of a leadership team of a company and to manage an entire group. And in all of that, I went from a very low-paying job to 3 years after finishing that degree, earning over 3 times, almost 4 times what I made in 2008 when I started all of this. I don't say that because I make more money than a lot of people or because I want to impress you, but because you got to understand that by taking those little actions, you'll be 5 years older anyway, that it pays off, that you can't even imagine what it will lead to, that the paths that I took were not at all what I planned when I started. And so that's lesson number 3, is when you get started and you keep going and you keep going, you can't even yet see where you could possibly land and where you'll end up. So I can hear the excuses swirling in your head. They go around and around. Because that's what they did in my head. And they still do. But you learn to deal with them. For example, I bet you're thinking, if you're thinking of a goal right now, you're thinking, that's too much work. I couldn't take that on right now. If you don't take anything away that goes down deep, take this away from me. You haven't even been tested to your limit yet. You don't yet know what you're capable of. And if you'll just start, you'll find that you can do and accomplish so much more than you think you can. You'll surprise yourself. I learned so much about what I could do during that period of time that was so grueling. I learned what I could do. And it makes other things easier now because I know what I'm capable of. If you've got the excuse in your head right now, what if it doesn't work? What if I spend all that time and it just doesn't pan out? Well, remember what Matt Broylo said. You'll be 5 years older anyway. Why not try? But also, you're asking the wrong question. Because the better question is, what if it does work? What if it only mostly works? If you shoot for the moon and fall a little bit short, you're still out of this world. What if it does work? And then there's a killer. And that is, I'm really busy right now. I'll do it later. Later is dangerous because you'll be 5 years older anyway. Later means you'll be 5 years older without the accomplishment. You start now. So take a second and think about it in your head, for yourself. What's that big goal that you want to accomplish? Bonus points if you write it down. Think about it for a second.
What are you known for here? What are you known for?
And with that in mind, let me just remind you one more time of the lessons that I learned. You'll be 5 years older anyway. If you just get started and keep moving, doors and opportunities that you can't see yet will open up, and you'll be able to capitalize on those opportunities. One success will lead to another. Even making progress within your goal will help to catapult you on to the next step. And when you accomplish what you set out to do, you can't even imagine yet the paths that it will lead you down. So let me be your Matt Broylo and stand on your cubicle wall and remind you, whatever, get started, because you'll be 5 years older anyway.